One thing I always remember about this church is you love a good joke. So I got to start off with some good humor. Are you ready? First of all, how many of you here have served in the military? Raise your hands. Okay, now how many of you in the military? Yes, thank you. Of you that were in the military, or are, how many of you served in aviation somehow? Okay, this is for you, sir. There's a story about a military pilot who called for a priority landing because his single-engine jet fighter was running hot and was sputtering. And the air traffic controller told the fighter jet pilot that he was number 2 behind a B-52 that had lost one of its engines. To which the fighter pilot said, the dreaded 7-engine approach. Pretty good, pretty good. Now, as I develop this message, which you all are getting for the very first time, because I plan on taking this thing on the road, regarding my experiences over the last couple of years. Honestly, as I sat in the ICU in the hospital, I said, there's so much that God has done and woven into this experience. There's no way I'm going to cover this all in one sermon. So I'm going to do like a 3-message series. But the problem with that thinking was, how many of these churches actually invite me to come for 3 weeks straight? So I had to condense a lot of information into one message, and that means we might be here a little while today. No, I'm just scaring you. But I want to share with you on the comedic side 10 signs you're in for a long Sunday sermon. Are you ready? Here we go. Number 1, there's a 6-pack of bottled water beside the pulpit and a cooler. Number 2, the pews have cell phone and iPad recharging ports. Don't look for them. Number 3, you overhear the pastor asking the soundboard volunteer how big the hard drive is on the digital recorder being used to record today's sermon. Number 4, the preacher has brought a snack into the pulpit. That would be just like me, wouldn't it? Number 5, the preacher breaks for intermission. I usually call it the 7th inning stretch, okay? Next, the bulletins include pizza delivery menus and the list of the closest restaurants with carry-out and delivery service. The pastor asks the usher to distribute his sermon notes, and he rolls them in with a hand truck. The choir loft would be furnished with a bunch of lazy boys. What do you think, choir? Would that be great? Instead of taking off his watch and laying it on the pulpit, the preacher turns old school and flips over a 4-foot hourglass. And lastly, but not least, the minister says, "Look, relax, you'll all be out of here in time to watch the Super Bowl, but it's only May." So there you go, a little humor for the morning. Now, to get your sermon notes out, we're talking today about how to keep your faith during difficult times. And let's be honest, it is easy for you and I to talk about faith when things are going pretty good, isn't it? When there's very little trouble in your life, it's easy to see, why we should believe what we believe and encourage others to develop and keep their faith. But what about prolonged periods of suffering or turmoil or a surprise attack on you personally or physically? I mean, how do we as believers keep and hold on to our faith during the really, really tough seasons of life? And many of you know, and I'd be remiss if I didn't take just a moment to thank this entire church for your prayers for me over the last year or two. At one time, I counted on Facebook alone over 500 people that were praying for me. Woo. And that doesn't count the people in our churches that aren't even on social media. And friends that I knew, and family. So I reasoned as I was getting my sickest that there were probably over 1,000 people praying for me specifically. And I thought to myself, who am I to justify that kind of response from people? It was a struggle for me to even fathom that. And yet, I get notes and cards and calls and emails and posts on Facebook all the time that say, Pastor Bruce, I prayed for you this morning. I'm praying for you. Our whole church is praying for you. And I was overwhelmed with that. It was incredible. It really was. And I can't thank this church enough for your involvement in that. The health scare that I went through for about the last 2 years or so was unlike anything else I had ever experienced in my life. And it literally had the potential to shake my faith. And I've had my faith since I was at age 15 when I surrendered my life to Christ. 45 years ago. Now I want to tell you the story, and then we'll get into your notes this morning. About a dozen years ago, plus or minus, I went into the hospital to have gastric sleeve surgery. I had finally gained so much weight in my adulthood, and I was getting ready to turn 50, and I said, I've struggled with weight my whole life. I remember shopping at the Husky department, at Robert Hall when I was a kid. That was embarrassing. But I got close to 50, and I was the biggest I'd ever been, and I said, I have to finally admit, I cannot do this on my own. I need some extraordinary method to help me to get healthy and lose weight. So I chose the gastric sleeve, which is one of 3 possible surgeries. And while the doctor was in there doing the procedure orthoscopically, he noticed something that he mentioned to me after that surgery, and he said, did you know that you have fatty cirrhosis of the liver? And I said, I had no idea. And he said, well, it's pretty pronounced. Have you not had any symptoms? And he told me what the symptoms were, and I said, I haven't had any of those symptoms. And he said, well, if I were you, I'd keep an eye on it. Now, how do you keep an eye on cirrhosis in your liver? Especially when you're not symptomatic. I didn't really know what that meant. So, fast forward to about 2 years ago, and I started to get symptoms. Initially, my primary care doctor thought it was a gastric problem. So he would give me medication to settle my stomach, check for ulcers, that kind of thing. It was not a gastric problem. It was my liver beginning to shut down. And it got really bad. I mean, really bad. When they finally diagnosed what the problem really was, which was liver failure, it sort of sent me in a tailspin. And it sent me on a journey where I started to research about organ donation, transplants. I myself have been on a transplant list for years because I believe in it. I've told my kids, pretty much all of my adult life, look, if anything ever happens to me, I want you to have them strip me for parts, okay, and burn the rest and just scatter my ashes over North Mountain or something. I don't really care, because it's just a vessel. Now, I don't know how easy that is for my kids to hear and understand and carry through with, but it's just the way I believe. If you can leave the gift of life or the quality of life to someone else as you leave this life, why wouldn't you do that? So what I found out was, in order to get a liver transplant, And by the way, I was not eligible for a partial transplant because what they basically said to me was, you're a big guy, half a liver won't do for you. So I'm looking for a donor to get a full liver transplant, and there is a consortium in the Washington metro area that kind of handles these things, and many doctors and specialists are tied to that, and they have meetings regularly, and they say, okay, who's the worst, who needs it the most, who's about to die if they don't get it, and it's not just livers, it's kidneys and all kinds of other things. So what I found out was that the average wait list for a liver in the DC metro area was 2.3 years. And I was getting sicker by the month. And they have the scoring system, where depending on what your number is, then you move up on the list. Well, my number went from about a 14 to about a 19, and there were still people waiting on the list with, ready for this, 32s. And I'm like, this is depressing to even think about. Not to mention the fact it took me to get on the wait list 10.5 months. You have to see doctors and specialists and nutritionists. You have to have tests upon tests upon tests, and then they recommend more tests. 10.5 months of jumping through hoops before I could even get on an eligibility list for a transplant. And every single one of those 10.5 months, I'm getting sicker and sicker. And some of you were here when we had the annual meeting for the Blue Ridge Association, and you saw the condition I was in. I was so debilitated I couldn't stand up out of that pew by myself. I had guys in this church that were so concerned about me, they wanted to drive me home. And I said, no, if you can just kind of push me over there and get me in the car, I'm fine to drive home. It was bad. I had fallen at my house on 3 different occasions, and I couldn't even get myself up off the ground. I had to pull my cell phone out of my pocket, call my son, and call my son-in-law and said, hey, I need help, and I'll be on the floor until you get here. That's terrible for a man. It really is. Strikes right at your pride. So 10.5 months, I get on the wait list for this liver, and I think, okay, now comes the wait. I mean, I thought I was waiting before. Now comes the long wait. And statistically, there are a lot of people that are on the wait list for a new organ that die on the list. It's true. A lot of folks do, because there are not enough replacement organs to meet the demand and the need. So I'm thinking, I'm in this for the long haul. My brother, who was my patient advocate, because he has some medical experience, and he knew to ask questions that I had no clue to ask about. What a blessing he was. He later admitted to me that when I got on the list early October, he said, I was afraid you weren't going to make it till Christmas. Of course, he couldn't tell me that at the time. I was afraid of that too. So I'm on the list, and are you ready for this? Isn't this just like God? I have the shortest wait in transplant consortium history. 2 weeks, and 3 days later, they are calling me up at 3 a.m. and saying, Mr. Conley, we have the perfect liver for you. Come to DC and get your liver. It still boggles my mind.
It's God.
It's God. And all the prayers of all the people, it was God.
Amen.
Recovery was rough. I was in the hospital for a month. I was in National Rehab Hospital for another 2.5 weeks. I finally got to go home around Thanksgiving time. And then I had tons of outpatient therapy, nurses, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and that lasted for months. Hit a bump in the road about 4 weeks ago when we discovered that some breathing problems that I'd had since surgery were actually fluid building up consistently on my right lung and collapsing the lung. So we had to go back in the hospital, have a procedure done to that right lung to try to keep the fluid from rebuilding and collapsing that lung. That stay in the hospital was 3 days. Cakewalk. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I cheated to get out because my O2 levels were low. But you can see that monitor. So I would just sit there for 2 hours going, because I said, I don't want to go home. It worked. And the next day, my O2 levels were fine. So I consider the one problem a bump in the road compared to what I have been through. And God has been so gracious to me and really given me another lease on life. Amen? Amen. So my life will not be the same, and I need to share with you the plurality of this whole experience this morning so that when you hit your season of hardship, you know how to sustain and maybe even build your faith during the most difficult times of life. It's that important that everyone know what I experienced. And so I'm just going to share with you this morning. Even with all the years of maturing my faith, all the reading of Scripture, the prayers, and the practice of trying to stay strong in my faith, the fact that my life might soon end was overwhelming to me. I remember coming to a point after begging God to help me make sense of it all and praying over and over again for Him to bring relief or to change this situation somehow as I deteriorated. I remember everything coming to a point where I finally sat down with Him after all the worry, after all the doubt, and just having a conversation and saying, okay, God, here's the deal. I've trusted you my whole adult life. And for that whole life, you have always had my back. Somehow, some way, you have always had my back. And you've always provided for me. So here's the deal. I'm feeling really rotten right now. I don't see any relief in sight. And if it's your will to take me home, I'm okay with that. I was prepared. I've been living this Christian life my whole life. I knew what it would mean. I was looking for relief. If God took me home, let me tell you, that's the ultimate relief. And so I said to Him, if somehow your plan, you having my back in all of this, is that you're going to take me, I'm okay with that. I can't wait to see you and hang out with you and praise you for the rest of eternity for what I temporarily kind of praise you, sometimes half-heartedly here. I said, but I need to make sure you're aware of something. He was aware. I said, that's not my personal preference. I'm only 60 years old. And I do believe I'm called to do what you have asked me to do as a leader in this association. Think about it. When I started here 11 years ago, we had about 27 churches. We got 43. Amen. And we're about to add number 44. God is moving, and it's not through my smarts. It's through His power and His provision and me sitting back and going, okay, where is God moving? What is He doing? Okay, we're going to go in that direction. Okay, we're going to join Him in that. That's all it is. But the kind of results we're getting are unlike any other association in the state of Maryland. Well, maybe there's one that comes close. So I say, God, I love doing this. I had planned to continue to work until I was about 70 and then retire and hand it off to the next leader. I would love to do that. I said, beside that, God, I would like to be around at least another decade so I can love on my kids and help them to love on my grandkids. And here's the other thing, God. I said, I have grandkids that I haven't even seen yet. I know they're coming. I want to be able to love on them. I want them to remember me. I want to kiss on that little sweet spot. You know, it's right here on the back of their neck. They're not here yet. And if I'm not here, I'm not going to be able to do that. So as honestly as I could, I just said to God, that would be my preference, if you could buy me more time. But either way, I'm okay with it. Just like our invitation hymn is going to be this morning. It'll be well with my soul. You're in charge. Just let me know what you need me to do. See, what happened was I remembered something that I learned when I suffered another huge previous life crisis. 3 years ago, when my wife of 38 years suddenly announced she was leaving our marriage. Because I found at that time that there were two important things that I learned during my almost 2.5-year grief and funk that was worse than I had ever experienced in life. And that happens to all of us, folks. When you are truly tested during a time of major life crisis or major illness, the two things that I discovered then were these, and I want you to write them down on your notes this morning. Growth and firming up of our faith, first of all, takes time. It takes time. And here's the other important thing that I realized back then that helped me now. It's the struggle that strengthens us. Write that down. It's the struggle that strengthens you and I. James 1:3 says, you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. You know that. It's not during the good times and the cookouts and the woohoo that your faith is built and your perseverance is increased. It's during the struggle that you and I are strengthened. See, usually our faith isn't tested during good times, is it? Our faith is tested during trials and times of extreme challenge. The times that you and I say, God, where are you? And all we hear is crickets chirping. That's when we're left to work through the very bedrock of our faith. Will we believe anyway, cultivating more faith in God? Or will we decide that He's not there, that He's ignoring us, and fall back on the voices that would tell us, you know, faith in God is just foolish. It's a waste of time. Now here are a few things that I learned during my journey. Would you agree with me that we are all going to go through tough times in this life?
Yes.
Jesus said in John 16:33, in this world you will have some trouble. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. Love that scripture. So as your difficulties begin, you must first, A, lean into the faith you have, no matter how small it may seem to be. Write that down. Lean into the faith you have, no matter how small it might seem to be. Revelation 14:12 says, this calls for patient endurance on the part of the saints who obey God's commands and remain faithful to Jesus. Choose to remain faithful when there is no visible finish line, listen, or no feeling or indication that you're going to get relief. Lean into it and bear through the discomfort that comes from trusting in what you really can't see. It's like me going to the gym now after months of outpatient physical therapy. Most days, I really do not feel like going to the gym. Does that surprise you? But see, I lost a lot of muscle mass when I lost a ton of weight being so sick. My second round of weight loss. By the way, I now weigh within 11 pounds of my police academy graduation weight in 1982. Now, I probably shouldn't clap at that because I do not recommend the weight loss program. But I never thought I'd be this, well, I'm never going to be skinny, but most days I do not feel like going to the gym, but I must rebuild muscle mass that I lost when I lost a lot of weight. And I must get strength back that I lost when I got so debilitated that I couldn't even pick myself up off the ground. So I must go 3 days a week and push myself. I've got arthritis in my right knee really bad. I spent 2 minutes on the treadmill, and my right knee's going, stop! And I'm going, no, I can't! I lean into that workout routine because I know that with perseverance will come strengthening. You get the point? Your faith in God works the same way. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. Brilliant. Second thing, you must pray for strength, guidance, and God's direct intervention. I can't tell you how many times I prayed for that over a period of like 14 months. God, I need your strength, I need your guidance, I need your direct intervention in my situation. Matthew 26:41 says, watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, the body is weak. During the discomfort, pray that God will guide your steps, keep you strong. Pray that he will deliver you somehow. Now, he could have delivered me through death or through healing. He chose the latter. And temptation to doubt can and will appeal to you and I, okay? It's a false, it's not akin to the truth of the Scriptures and the truth of God. But you have to pray through your situation. And if you fall into doubt and depression, which, by the way, we all do at times, then start over again the next day. I'm a minister, and I'll be honest with you, there were days I did not feel like talking to God and praying. The next day, because I've been doing this for 45 years, I should know better. I said, okay, God, today we're going to talk. I'm going to make my petitions known to my Heavenly Father, like the Scripture challenges me. So start over again. Keep choosing God over and over and over again in your hardship. See on your outline, remain planted in good soil. In other words, keep that firm foundation. When you feel the struggle heavy on your back, bury yourself in more good soil. Surround yourself with loving friends. Do a morning devotional before starting the day. Read the Bible. Put some encouraging messages on Post-it notes and put them all over the house so you can see them as you go from room to room. Attend a worship service. Watch an online sermon from a pastor that you are always challenged by. Ask someone you love to pray with you and for you. Meditate on God's positive principles and thoughts. Stay in God's Word. The tough times will hit you and I, but we are called as children of God to something that is bigger and so much better, listen, than any temporary life circumstance that can come your way. Life can be bittersweet sometimes. Some days it seems like everything is going so well. And then there are some days when the clouds get so thick, they block out all the light. And it's on these darker days that you need your faith the most. There was a story just this past week about a 15-year-old girl from Berkeley Springs who was murdered by her stepfather or future stepfather. And it caught my heart, especially, not just because Berkeley Springs is 30 minutes away from my home. He dumped her on the road to my house. And there's a makeshift memorial on Tuscarora Pike coming up North Mountain with balloons and teddy bears and I'll be honest, the whole situation just sent me into oh my gosh. It fractured me. I live in a neighborhood where if the postman drops a package at the base of your mailbox because it's too big to go in, nobody bothers the package. And yet somebody saw fit to dump a dead body down the road from me, less than a mile away. What is wrong with this picture? I tell you, it had an effect on me. Now, there are some things I recommend that can help you through your darkest days. And we'll move on your outline this morning. As the storm rages, number one, keep doing the things that make you strong. You might find peace in reading, listening to music, or taking a nature walk. Keep doing those things. Stay true to the activities that give you strength, because these are probably the things that will nourish your soul and ultimately feed your faith. Okay? Number two, allow yourself to grieve over what you have lost. I went through a 2.5-year grief period after my wife walked out. And losing your faith a little bit in those moments of life happens. It does. But it doesn't mean that you are broken. It just means that your faith is not strong at that moment. Acknowledge this and permit yourself to feel the sadness that loss can bring. To change your condition, you must first acknowledge reality. Name it, call it out, label it for what it is, weep over it. Your cries will be heard. In Psalms 10:1, David says this, "Why, O Lord, do you stand far away? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble?" And then in Psalm 13:1, he says again, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" See, David had no problems expressing his true feelings to God, did he? Folks, it's okay to grieve. In many ways, it can be healing for your soul to just grieve and weep. Number three, be patient with the uncertainty. I had a lot of uncertainty during my illness. You've heard the phrase, "Lord, give me patience and give it to me right now." Right? When you're struggling with your faith, stay in the moment as long as you need to. Your loss of faith may last a few days, a few weeks, a few months. Some people, like my mom, endure a loss of faith for years. She did for decades, because she lost her firstborn child to cancer at age 5.5. and she never forgave God for taking her baby. It wasn't until she was on her deathbed, and by the way, I couldn't talk to my mom about God or religious matters because it always turned into an argument. And you parents, you think you always know more than your kids, right? What is it with that? So I had to send my pastor, because I was an associate pastor on staff at that time, over to my house to visit my mom in a hospital bed in my dining room because I wanted to make sure I was going to see my mom in heaven again one day, and she really hadn't lived her life like that the whole time I was growing up. And he came back and came into my office at the church and shut the door, and he said, "Bruce, you're going to see your mom again in heaven." Amen. It's not like she doesn't know him. And she has surrendered her life to him. But then she changed her mind when she got really ticked at him. But he said, "You're going to see her again. She's got the assurance of her salvation." Can I tell you how great a feeling that is? Thank God for Dr. Jimmy Payne. Your loss or diminished faith because of a huge life crisis may last a long time, but listen, you will not be abandoned. Use that time to build your faith around the certainty that there is a purpose behind the scenes. And that purpose is created just for you. 2 Peter 1, 5-6 challenges you and I when it says, "Make every effort to add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance." And what comes after perseverance? Godliness. Godliness. Number 4, watch how you rebound and fill in the gaps. Above all, be true to your convictions and yourself. When you feel your faith starting to return, make certain it is your faith and not just a need to begin feeling something, anything, because you felt barren for so long. The problem is when you do that, you start aligning yourself with values that are not in your set of core beliefs and values. 1 Corinthians 16:13 says, "Be on guard, stand firm in the faith, be courageous and strong." Number 5, faith is resistible. Did you ever realize that? Learn not to resist, but to receive more. Your faith is never taken from you. But in our humanity, we sure can resist it from time to time, can't we? I mean, your faith is a gift of grace from Almighty God. And you get to choose when and how and to what volume you will receive it. Or you can choose not to. So many people choose to resist faith because they feel like they can't trust it, or that it will be fleeting, or that in the midst of their own personal life choices and circumstances, it'll probably not be what they were hoping it would be. They can't guarantee how long faith will stay with them, so they abandon any attempt on the front end. Can you imagine buying a new car and telling the dealer at the dealership, "Oh, I don't believe in warranties, so you can just forget about that"? None of us would do that, would we? There's a song I love the lyrics to because there's one line in the song that says this: "Sweet surrender is the only power I need." We are so worried in this nation about freedom and freedom of choice and having the power to make our own decisions in life. And yet, when it comes to the things of God, sweet surrender is all the power I really need. Do you believe that?
When will we as Christians finally ascribe to that and live it every day? When we learn to surrender, listen, and allow ourselves to open up to what God has in store for us, then faith will multiply, and it will manifest itself in ways in your life that you have never experienced before. That's the truth. Number 6, get involved. To the extent that you are able, get involved. Practicing faith takes action. Faith requires you to think, feel, and believe. And when you stand on the sidelines and expect your faith to arrive without any deliberate intent on your part, then you run the risk of missing the chance to get back in the game. Get involved with the people that the people that touch your heart the most, especially in your hardship. Spend more time with your children, with your grandchildren. Volunteer if you can. Get behind a group or an organization that you believe is absolutely making a positive difference in the life of others. I'll share a personal aspect of my stay in the hospital. I'm a director of missions. It's what I do. I help churches. I plant new churches. I take churches and church plants that are struggling, and I help them get back on their feet and get their priorities straight and honor God. So here I am in the ICU, and I'm in a heap. I'm in bad shape. But we have a mission church in Hancock, Maryland, that the pastor, after giving it a real good try for about 5 or 6 years, said, "You know what? I'm giving up. I can't do this anymore." And while I thought I was gifted to do this, I think I'm probably more gifted to shepherd an existing church rather than start one from scratch. So we had to start to try to find a new pastor to restart the work. Well, long story short, we found the pastor, and I got sick and went in the hospital. So I reached out to a good friend who was a retired pastor named Bob Gerstmeyer. Some of you know Bob. Bob ran Baptist Family and Children's Services for years. And he's an elder over at Covenant Baptist. And I said, "Bob, you mentioned to me in passing that as I was getting sicker, if there was anything I needed, well, I need you." I said, "I need you to meet with this young pastor. I need you to set up, this turnkey operation. Association is paying the rent on the facility until they can get on their feet. He's got to start and develop a core group. This is going to be a long process, but I can't do it. Would you take this ball and run with it?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd be honored to." So while I'm in the ICU, in a heap, Bob's running this project for us. And he kept calling me up saying, "Bruce, I wanted to keep in the loop. I want to tell you this, and we're going to try to do a meeting after Thanksgiving when you get home, and could we have it at your house?" And I said, Bob, stand by." I said, "You're the leader of this thing. I'm not going to be in any shape to do all of this. I don't need to be there. It's okay. Run with it." And he said, "Okay, I'm sorry. I said, "As soon as I'm healthier, I'll be in the loop, okay?" And Bob Gerstmeyer is a major reason now why our restart in Hancock is going swimmingly. And we have not one, but 2 churches in that region who are helping to support and restart that work. Amen. It's a God thing. I didn't need to be a part of that. I wanted to. Okay, number 8. 8? Is that what we have? No. 7. Focus on positive things, even though there are plenty of negative ones. If you find yourself coming back from a difficult situation where your faith has been tested, begin to look for small and positive things and accentuate those. Every good thought or encouraging experience is not an accident. They are signs to remind you of the purpose and the hope that God has waiting for you.
Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. Okay, number 8. Have deep water faith in the shallow end. You remember as a kid going to the neighborhood pool? I do. Goldsville Pool. Great neighborhood pool. Ours had a shallow end with an increasing depth up to about 6 feet. And then there was the diving well, which as a kid, it looked like to me it was bottomless. You know? It was scary. And as I moved further and further away from the shallow end into deeper waters, what happened to me? My confidence, my faith began to fade. Now, you and I can be a lot like a new swimmer, too. Your faith can be strong when you know what to expect. To do more in life, sometimes you need to take the chance that God has been asking your heart to take. You need to have faith and jump into the deep end. Living by faith is about free will choice to trust God and choose His way over our own. And yes, at times it takes a risk on your part, instead of playing it safe all the time. I got to tell you, as a director of missions that works with 43 churches, the churches that drive me the craziest are the ones that always play it safe. Because I think, where's faith in all of that? It's about keeping the faith, not just in times of peace, but in times when you feel terrible. It's at times where you feel like giving up or choosing another path. Now, I'd love to say that I get this right all the time, folks. I don't. I want to, but the struggle against my own humanity is real and at times extremely difficult. Okay, let's move into the last section. There are 7 hard facts of life that you must realize to strengthen your faith during difficult times, okay? Knowing these facts will help you to protect your beliefs from being shaken, and it can answer your doubts before they even come up. So let's look at these and then we'll close. Number 1, bad things happen to good people. Did you know that? Yeah. First thing you need to realize about life is that bad things can happen to good people. Good and bad things happen to people no matter what their spiritual experience or station in life. Matthew 5:45 says this: God causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. And Christian, you need to know that many times these bad events can be, listen, can be a test to see how strong your faith is. Number 2, the same test might be repeated until you pass it. I believe I did a whole sermon on that once here. When my liver failed and I had doubts that I could be saved with a transplant in time, God had a tendency to allow trials and tests with doctors and medical tests to be delayed. At one point, I thought my surgeon, who I was working with, just kept putting things off. And I'm like, come on, I want to go. I got to get on this list. And he would say, we'll do it next month. And I got so frustrated with that. But the testing of your faith might be certain conditions or problems that come your way, and they happen again, or maybe again, and those problems don't appear to have any solution. And you're getting frustrated by that. James 1:2-4 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you encounter trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Allow perseverance, it says, to finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. Number 3, bad events are sometimes, are you ready for this? a blessing in disguise. Ooh, I didn't want to hear that. If you ever feel like you are failing at God's testing of your faith, then use that as a catalyst to do something more in your life. I'm reminded of the story of Larry Ellison, who found out at a very young age that he had been adopted and that his birth parents had abandoned him. And he said that was emotionally shattering to me when I found out about it. He admitted to feeling inept and inadequate for much of his early life because of being discarded by his own parents. And the fact that his current parents did not share with him until, much later, the actuality of that situation. Ellison was adopted by a Jewish family and raised in Chicago, although he never graduated from college. With two others, he founded the Oracle Corporation. Sound familiar? In 1977, developing computer database software. He turned his initial investment of $1,200 to a fortune of over $7 billion. He says that the goals in his life changed when he felt compelled to prove that he was not like any other child, and certainly not worthy of being discarded. Today he's one of the most brilliant businessmen in the world. And for Ellison, this bad event in his life became a blessing in disguise. Your prayers will be answered in the right time, not in your preferred time. We all want our prayers to be answered right away, but sometimes God knows the time is not suitable for that to happen, even though we might think it's the right time. God will delay bringing things to a solution in order to accomplish His goals for our lives. Isaiah 58:8 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord." Okay, next. Sometimes your prayers will be answered, but they will be answered in a different way. Imagine you really wanted a certain job. You go and you interview and do all the background stuff. You get turned down. But 2 weeks later, you get an even better job. Had you gotten the first job, which is what you really wanted, you would have never known about the second. In other words, sometimes prayers are answered in a different way than we want because God's plan is so much better for you and I. Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." Next on your outline, don't interpret events the wrong way. I didn't get that job, so geez, I guess God doesn't want me to work. Or I didn't get that job, and I thought this was the job for me, so I guess, God's just being mean to me. He's abandoning me. I'm pretty sure you have a situation or two that you can recall where you could strengthen your beliefs during a dry or hard season of life. And you kind of missed it when it happened. It's so easy for us to slip into wondering why you didn't get the help that you were expecting back then. And why did God help me then, but now He's not helping me now? And if that's your situation, then know that the right time might not quite be here yet. Folks, we will all go through hard times at various times through our lives. Learning how to keep and nurture your faith during not only the good times, but during those really tough seasons can change your life for the better. And it can give you skills to cope better in the future as the next tough season comes. And here's the bonus. It can help you to build your faith so that when someone else you know is going through a hardship or a struggle similar to yours, you are the tool that God will use to help them through that season. And I got to tell you, I just pray every day that what I've experienced for the last couple of years, that God will use me 1,000 times over again to encourage someone else who thinks that all hope is gone. Because if I don't do that, I waste every experience He's put me through.